I realized if there's bullshit in the neighborhood annoys me over and over and over and over and over. In my job, every delivery and a half, there will be one. Or you know what I'm saying? Every 3 deliveries, there's one. But when I asked about becoming a person in the Peace Corps long ago, when I was like maybe 19, or like Doctors Without Borders, you're like, no, you will not. I'm like, why? And I realized it's because I've gotten scagged out of my mind if I did go to some fucked up wars. It's so true. You know what I'm saying? Like, some bullshit people in Iran deal with. They had good intentions, but then next thing they know, they had a giant block of tar and a fucking machine gun. Maybe like Thailand or like Guatemala, just as far away. You know, Peace Corps, Doctors Without Borders. Next thing you know, the hordes are having the trails just as long. You've got fucking multiple fucking submachine guns and just fucking a wall of fucking heroin. I'm gonna do the footnotes to the Pendells baseball game, 2 LC chapters, and at the Sacred Elixirs conference, rather. So, let me explain this. The conference at the time had a political sort of backdrop. The thing about all the ayahuasca churches were kind of a really big thing. And, so yeah, at the time, the Native American church had access to peyote. That was under the the legal sanctions of the United States government. But since then, it's been noted to be debated as if how legit the drugs laws are in that sense, because then it's a racist sort of thing. And not even that, but the whole idea about peyote being banned in the first place being dangerous because it is based off of racism too. I'm sure if I brought it up in the video, but the thing about how they would say, oh, you can't give alcohol to Native Americans, same sort of deal. Peyote was the devil, basically. And there's more to it too. It's called like the ghost dance. Maybe I'll do the peyote chapter from Bendel. Goes into it. But something about the Trail of Tears, they forced all the Native Americans to move. And the Native Americans said they had one, like a medicine basically, to get through it. And it was peyote. Well, that also was, just another thing to harass them with, I guess. So, yeah. At this time, though, with the ayahuasca churches, that was kind of a way around it, commonly in the popular culture, so to speak. But in the psychedelic news, it was just a lot of just stuff about DMT entities. That's it. It was like huge. On Coast to Coast AM, they had on, I can't remember. Had on Rick Strassman, and his book DMT, the Spirit Molecule, cracked it open in a big sense. I think that from that point in the 90s, that book had documented it. Before then, all the way up to the 60s, when Nixon had started the war on drugs, that's when the end of psychedelic research had officially ended, so to speak. But Strassman's book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, not only was it a huge thing because it made all these people start talking about DMT and they're fascinated by it, but also that it was an official scientific research study of psychedelics that had not been done for 30 years. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I hear that claim now, and there's some ways I can doubt it, but then still it's like, I guess it was like maybe, yeah, you maybe give ketamine to heroin addicts, but Yeah, it's probably, I don't know. So, yeah. Let me see more notes and trying to compile this. But yeah, my string of conspiracy parts is to talk about why does he bring up Chicago and the nuclear reactor when critical? And but yeah, if you look at the guy who made MDA, the chemist, he looks awfully a lot like him. It's kind of weird. And yeah, I would expect that maybe with Operation Paperclip, it's like actually it's the other way around. He made LSD and then he made MDA. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. But then the other thing too is that MDMA had been synthesized in Germany for 20, 30 years before. And there is a very interesting talk or whatever interview with Hamilton Morris that's about these concentration camp papers that are like they give the fucking captive people or whatever mescaline, and then there's other things that are like censored and they don't know what it is. But yeah, he goes into it. Basically it's like kind of like why at the time I was extremely fascinated with ayahuasca, because the active ingredient harmaline used to be called telepathy. Well, he just as much he would say, oh yeah, you can read people's minds with these psychedelics, and it's just, he says it's just a wet dream for fucking fascism or whatever like that, because then you could see who your enemy, in your party, if your enemy, somebody's trying to plot against you, blah blah blah. But yeah, that was a huge thing too. It was the ayahuasca was like, oh my god, telepathy, what? But there is a James Kent. He went on and on and on about skepticism and psychedelics, and it is very, very important. If anybody's interested, they research that too, because I always bring it up to people. But at the time in the '90s, the idea about there was new age bookstores before there was the internet, that was a huge gap in knowing what was what was what did what, and a lot of just new age books are just fucking just crazy bullshit. I hate to be an asshole, but I think he is himself, or I guess it's, but he goes into it that it's like before there was fact checking, new age bookstores just proliferated so much crazy information. You know what I'm saying? Like healing crystals, all the kind of Atlantean reincarnation stuff, dolphins, consciousness. It just keeps going. All the different races of star-being aliens. Oh man, I always tell people if they have never been born before the internet, I'm like, you know about how crazy new age bookstores, man. You go, it is just wild. Because I was a little boy, I was too young to really, really appreciate it. But it was just, he was saying it was almost, there was one in every town. You know what I'm saying? There was one in every town, and then the books in there were just it's just based off a lot of hearsay. So yeah, okay. So about sacred elixirs is a few years before I had been on TV talking about abusing the dissociative over-the-counter cough medicine called dextromethorphan on Fox News, the local news here. And I've never been able to rewatch it, but I just cringe at how bad it is. But they try to make me like the hero, while other people are like just fuck up addicts. But I mean, yeah, it was like I remember just ripping a fat after. But yeah, I guess the other people were like probably shooting up glass or something. I don't know. But yeah, at the conference with James Kent, he had a buddy. It was me and my friend John were the two youngest guys there. But there was this guy, Cliff Anderson, who had written this big thing about how DXM doesn't damage your brain. There had been previously, it would very widespread, this thing about DXM, damage your brain, written by somebody underneath the pseudonym. And yeah, And he kind of resembled the director of that show, weirdly. She was a nice lady, but I'm kind of sad I never been able to watch it, but it kind of haunts me because I remember my little brother's like, dude, they showed you in our high school class. And I was like, oh god, that's funny. But yeah. This conference was in San Jose. It was right next to the Adobe building. And like I was saying, there's just fucking 200 unique different drug books or whatever, just strange books. Like I was saying about Hieronymus Bosch, I got this really nice coffee table book about Hieronymus Bosch. Who I in college I discussed with the professor about who was that guy? Why is his art so strange? And he explained that, and I think I get into the name. I can't remember the name. It's Paracelsus. I think he's friends with Paracelsus, and so this is in like the mid 17th century. Paracelsus is the one who he made the phrase like the dose makes the poison, and he was I've not gotten really deeply into him, but yeah, I do have this T-shirt. So yeah, Paracelsus, and then also I came away with the maps, which is the multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies hoodie, which had a similar thing. It was like a guy, a wizard breaking through to the. He's looking through the. What is it called? He's like looking through one layer of the world. I forgot what they call it because it's like a flat earther term or something. But he's looking through into the stars, basically. Well, my art teacher had explained though that Hieronymus Bosch was part of some kind of strange like spiritual guild, a guild of artists who would take, I guess back then they had in Europe it was like henbane and opium and hashish and alcohol, and they would combine it. There's a book I had about a brief history of drugs, where it talks about this sort of thing, this poison or wine, where and then even they were saying even maybe it might be part of the Bible or something like that, but the idea about wine is the only medium that doesn't go bad, that you can keep these drug, poison potions in, so to speak. And it references in the book about the Odyssey, where the giant, he takes one sip of wine and he dies. So it's like, okay, that's not normal wine, right? Well, this is some sort of like thing. And also, there was like a sort of side kind of like conspiracy website as well that would talk about like blue honey and that sort of thing. Terrence Malick kind of talks about it. He's like honey, preserved mushrooms, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, let's see. So yeah, at the conference, the headliners were Sasha Shulgin and this guy Earl Crockett talking about in Baja, there's something called the Elfin Cardone cactus, which is a very, 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 like the second tallest cactus in the world. It's very huge. And it doesn't exactly have mescaline like peyote does, or whatever, San Pedro, etc. But it has sort of like an ayahuasca effect in it, where it's beta carbolines or whatever, sort of kind of like that I was saying, telepathy, that sort of chemical. It has that, and it has things close to it, where in itself it has a sort of effect. And it was a very fascinating talk. I'm trying to find more shit. I asked a guy, William Lloyd or something, can I get something about the poster of it? I want to make a video. Nothing. Unfortunately. There's a lot of other people. Like I said, it was about kind of like the art history, plant sacraments and art history. You think about drugs. It wasn't. It was really boring and silly in a way, in respect to the discussion. Or it was very like dry. You know what I'm saying? It was nowadays with like the huge like fucking auditoriums full of like 2,000 fucking entrance people with like the whole like all this different research, frontiers. It's just so crazy how different it is. And even I have a book. Oh, it's an Escondido that is like these very very first conferences in Mexico where it's it's like that, but even less. It was like 10 people maybe. So yeah, that's the history. I want to try and explain like the history of it, kind of. But yeah, let's see. There's breath work. We did breath work, and my friend John did like what do they call it, some sort of like weird like biofeedback thing where they're reading your brainwaves while you think of something, and then you think of something more and more. And it was kind of just kind of like Scientology, I guess maybe, but like to the times four or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're good or bad. Does it make you sweat or not? It's like nah. There's even more brain frequencies that can be read that you can like tell people to think. It's just so silly, but yeah. So it was pretty boring though. I mean, it was fascinating, but like I said, why I'm making this video too is like, oh my god, back then I could fucking abuse so much fucking weed. It was just stupid. Oh my god. But at that conference, Dale Pendell was there, and he was kind of like the devil's advocate, so to speak, where some people are like, "Oh yeah, the amanita mushroom is very prominent in Christian symbolism." He's like, "That's all it means, or how do I explain it? Same thing. The Buddhists have the flowering lotus. He's like, "You're saying it's just that the effects of that? That's fucking ridiculous." But the point is that it's like if there is like cults that trace all the way back to the pre-religious like groups, and they are um influenced by drugs, that's what like starts it. Part of the thing is like why drugs are so transgressive is that they actually like erase those lines and make it like full of middlemen, so to speak. You know, I'm not big into Catholicism, but I remember I talked with this this guy who was pretty this whatever counselor who's really really well versed in that whole thing about how uh, if you pay for your punishment or something to the Catholic Church. I don't know. I never get into it all, or just as much if somebody died, you can pay for them to come back from hell to go into purgatory. Yeah, that's what we talk about. So what is purgatory? And it was just like it's kind of like gets in the way. Saying, but yeah, I gone to it very curious about like about the Native American church, for example. It's like why why different tribes have just so many different stories, so to speak, or so many. Terrence McKenna's whole start of all this thing, which got me into the art history, was something about in it's like you can find like evidence of that it really it affected the people. So he's explaining like the shamans of like Tibet, and I think that's why Tim Leary or whatever and all those Harvard people were interested in the Tibetans. But it's so strange now saying this because it has kind of like um it has the same trappings that the Nazis did, where they explain, oh, these Aryans were like the starting people, and they're like, you know, they're closer to God or something like that. But then even just the word Aryan is just like they've completely misinterpreted what it even meant. It's like some just people who live on mountains or something, and it's just I don't know how to explain it. A lot of this, like I said, is so far in the past that it's like, I don't know, just a lot of silliness. Yeah, so far after this, when I was in my worst period of time, though, and I was talking with that counselor, though, Dale Pendell really was interesting because he had gone into, and they discussed this at this rehab, that uh, that in the Bible it's like pharmakon is a Greek word that can be interchangeable. It could be demon, it could be drug, or it could be like magic spell or something like that. But that, you know, and I try to look into a little bit about, because I'm a pretty sacrilegious person, being a gay man or whatever. That all right, but the idea that the Bible had gone through like multiple languages by the time it's reached even the English language, and even when the English language had gone through so many you know, uh, translations that it kind of like maybe lost some meaning. But Pendel had explained that in the Bible it says something about like, "Thou shalt not make stumbling blocks for people," when it talks about, and or do not make a stumbling block for your brother. And yeah, I think that's a quote from Jesus. It's like, which, you know, one big criticism of Jesus is that it's a lot of talk of like money. I could be wrong. I have to relook into this one, but it does have that point too. I don't know. Just blabbering. Oh, but one other exclusion at the time that was like a legal loophole was for cannabis, where they didn't go into this at all at the conference, but in the Bible it talks about the holy anointing oil has, I think, like 7 different herbs, and it also has cannabis. So yeah, that was kind of weird now thinking back that they covered all these other things but not that. But I'm sure that there were some people there who's like, "I got you covered, man. I can get you to be a member of the whatever Sacred Church of God, or what do they call it? I forget."
It's like chapter 20. Do not make like. Maybe you should include the Arrowhead team was like telling me about how they get really weird reports of being like, I'm a Freon inhalant addict and I used to like the special rent set to break into freaking air conditioners. What? It was so good. I forget. Can I say any more? There was just.
So it's so funny now thinking back about being only like 18 or 19 at that conference, and how weed legalization works now, where it's like you have to be over 21, and you can't buy more than an ounce of weed, and yeah, but also just as much, like when I met the Arrowwood team, I told them about Google, and Google changed quite a bit, where um, it changes and changes, but uh, now it's like you type in any major drug and it's like, oh, you called the SAMHSA number or whatever, and then if you need help or something, which is kind of just strange, because back then I was telling them, wow, it's like if you type in mushrooms or something, magic mushrooms, it's gonna give you the Arrow page before it gives you the DEA page, and I don't know if this is just based on hits alone or what, but they're pretty cool people. I kind of like a bittersweet feelings about it because that website is slowed down so much, but because it was an organization that was funded by donations, and yeah, there's a lot of stories on it about people who have gone into ERs like overdosing, and the team of the nurses and that and all, or the doctors who don't know the drug, and they'll look it up on that web, and who look it up and they get the answer from that website. But there's some pretty cool people like. I explained in this footnote of we're watching now about they're saying it, all the unpublished reports, because there are some real bad ones out there, I'm sure. And there's like, for example, they said DXM is the number one, where it's just like we don't need to waste the time to submit this. It's just completely stupid. But they were saying like people being like Freon addict was an example of a really weird one where they were like, "Oh, I love huffing Freon. Here's like the specific wrench set for this air conditioning unit." Oh my god. Yeah, and then and it's weird because after that, like a few years later, you saw a few YouTube videos about Freon inhalation. It was like if you think that like nitrous or whatever makes your voice deep, it's like the deepest. So stupid. Oh, okay. So lastly about the speakers, there was also stuff about sort of what they call it, just like pseudo ayahuasca. The idea about like using grasses or something, and if that is part of like the Hindu tradition. And then Pendela talked about in one of his cannabis books about this thing about weed, but it talks about it as like grassy stalks. And it's very interesting too because you think about the Chinese like lettering. So you studied it, I think, quite a bit. If you look into his T chapter, it's just insanely long. And something about there is a Buddhist or a version of the Buddha named Sheng Nyung who claimed he invented farming. He discovered weed. But my thing is, oh man, that man has to be fucking jacked up on ephedra. Look at his eyes. He's like always like and just the fact that he claimed that he invented and discovered all that stuff is just hilarious. And being like, I don't know. But other things too. They said he would like be able to find a poison and then find the antidote like multiple times in a day. Is that his claim to fame or something like that? Okay, so in the talk though, I talk about how just in jest maybe that KPFA was like, or no, Negla would be like on over the edge being an LSD distributor. Which I was watching a video about having a radio tower, and you have to have nitrogen to cool like parts of the fucking electronics or something. But so Don Joyce, the host, oh man, it was so good back in the night. Being able to call in, it's just so many, just how strange it was calling in and people call in, and it's just crazy. But they said he was like a calculator salesman, something like that, and he got into advertising. And I forgot to read more about this book I have about LSD blotter. Yeah. Yeah. Brief, because I gotta go to bed. But I was last speaking about the idea about the people with the chemicals that can treat paper. Oh, they can make LSD or whatever. The radio station with the nitrogen tanks, they can make LSD. But more importantly, nobody really cares about that as much as they care about the modern state of the drug war, which is like the whatever the fentanyl crisis or whatever. And let's rewind a little bit back then when there was basically only heroin. I just realized right now I completely forgot about it, but the idea about the kit to make Tylenol itself can somehow convert regular everyday over-the-counter codeine in many other countries and in some states in the United States at that time into heroin. And yeah, it's very quite simple. But then I was even thinking like, well, why do the fucking all these pharmaceutical companies, why would they even keep all the Tylenol on deck with the Norco? It's because then they could, you know what I'm saying? The people are like, oh no, it's only cartel. There's no like, heroin cowboy people. That's fucking insane now. Just think about that equation. because it's so very, very, very simple. Yeah, because you could just buy it over the counter and separate with water. Is like, oh my god. So yeah, but I want to read more of that one book, but I need to go to sleep for work. Oh my god. Yeah, I forgot about that completely. And maybe that's even why they're phasing it out. I don't know. It's not only the overdoses, but the idea that, I don't know. I always saying when I'm driving by the Scripps, like whatever research building or whatever you want to call it, hospital, like where it's like the official Scripps. So it looks like it's not really a hospital. It's like a giant cube. There's like these like little squares jetting out of it, which they're just probably just fumes. I'm like, that's crazy in a rock. I was telling Patrick, I just wanted to jump over there and I just huff that shit. Just kidding. Terrible. But yeah, I forgot about that completely. That's actually quite crazy. Just because of it, both of them are so widely available in any nation, really. You know what I'm saying? And not to say that other nations outside of the U.S. are responsible or conscientious ones in it, but the thing is, it was very intense, the war on terror back then. The whole thing about, what is it called? I forget what, that Al Qaeda was like the number one, even though it was the number one, um, you know, what's the right word? In human rights uh, problems against women, George Bush still awarded them a bunch of money at one time, right before 9/11. And then they fucking attacked, and then they made they controlled all the fucking heroin market or whatever, the opium market for like that whole portion of the world, and they made the price raise up super high, and it's just fucking insane. I fucking hate thinking about 9/11 sometimes. So sad. So very sad. Anyways, yeah, so I don't know. I forgot about that completely. That stupid ass Tylenol synthesis kit is the key. And even I went on shopping right now and you could see it. There's like these little bottles, but it's like, the store's not available for you. I'm like, okay. All right, well, you say so. Good.